Welcome with a big round of applause.
Appreciate it. Is everyone awake this morning? Is this the usual crowd you get for 8 a.m. Thursday or Tuesday mornings?
Yeah, it's 8 o'clock less.
8 o'clock, yeah. Well, at least it's not a Friday, right? These are brutal, right? The 8 a.m. classes, I remember that. But you get to pack more in. Before I get started, maybe I'd like to, I'll tell you about myself, but I'd like to understand a little bit about you guys. So most of you guys here are, I think you said you're seniors, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's even more impressive. You guys are graduating in about a month or so, and you're here at the 8 a.m. class. So that's pretty good. Pretty impressed with that. Are most people, so I want to understand, because it's been 28 years since I graduated. So it's a long time. So I want to understand like how like the demographics have changed. When I went to school here, virtually everyone was from like Ohio, Northern Ohio, or upstate New York, right? It was a very weird dichotomy. But I want to understand how many people here are from Ohio? Okay. How many people from a different state in the United States? Like where are you guys from? Illinois?
Indiana.
Indiana, so surrounding states.
Georgia.
Georgia.
Michigan.
Michigan, okay. Michigan, okay. Pennsylvania, okay. So surrounding states, regional. How about from outside the United States? Anyone from outside?
India.
India, excellent, okay. Morocco, okay, very good. Very good. Yeah, like I said, when I came here, I think in the 4 years I was in the College of Business, there wasn't a single person that was from outside the United States. And virtually everyone was from Ohio. So definitely the community's changed, education's changed. It's not more global. We'll talk about that when we get into my presentation. So, we'll get this started again. Okay, is it up there? All right. Okay, like I said, Mike Eversack. So let me talk about myself personally. I'm originally from a place called Cuyahoga Falls, which is near Akron. Anyone from that area around here? Akron? Where are you from?
Like Canton.
Canton, okay. So, yeah, you know Cuyahoga Falls. But I've been originally from there, but I've been living in Lexington, Kentucky for 19 years. So John brought me there. Lexmark International is headquartered down there, so I've been there a long time. Raised a family, 2 children, married for 20 years. And one of the reasons I'm here is one of my children is we're doing campus tours. She's a junior in high school, and we are going around to different universities and trying to convince her to come here, but we'll see where she ends up. She's actually over there in the corner. That's Avery, my daughter. So we're going to be doing the campus tour at 10 a.m. and sort of what's around. So put in a good word about Bowling Green. I guess you guys are at the end of your situation here, campus career. So if you have any words of advice, yay or nay, let her know. Okay. So that's on a personal level. So since I've been here, I've traveled all over the world. I've either worked or lived or studied around the world. And studied abroad, France, South Africa, and managed multiple teams around the world. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And so one of the big reasons I'm here is to share this knowledge of 28 years. Because I was in this seat 28 years ago on the cusp of graduation, looking outwards. And so the something to share here is it's not very specific to like logistics or supply chain. It's like you can apply this to any career of any major, okay? Though at the end, if you guys have questions about supply chain or operations, feel free to ask. Let's see. Oh, yeah, so I like disc golf and volleyball too. That's my kind of passions. Okay, so this is my student ID from back in 1995. Okay. Now, I bet they look a little bit different now. So anyone guess why I blinked this out? Why would I blank out my student ID number?
Your ID number was your social security number?
That's right. Your ID number was your social security number. So it was amazing back then. That's what you passed around to everybody. Every place that you go, you pass around your social security number. You could actually get in the bars with your student ID back then. So fake IDs were a big thing back then for campus IDs. But that's the way it worked. And I held on to it. I still have it. was able to take a picture of that last night. Held on for like 10 years after graduating. Anyone can guess why? What benefit do you get from keeping your ID? You still get student discounts at movies? Yeah, until I was like 30, I was passing out saying, you know, still a student. So I don't know if they still do that. Do you still get student discounts at movie theaters?
I don't think so.
No, man, it's too rampant. Back there, you get like almost half off on students. So I kept that around for years. So I want to talk about my career a little bit before we get into my words of wisdom that I've learned. So we're going to talk about this. I did graduate in a degree with purchasing, production, international business. Is a degree now? Can you just? We didn't even call it supply chain back then. Can you graduate now with a degree in supply chain, or is it still like operations and logistics and all that?
It's supply chain.
It is supply chain. Okay, so that was as close as we got back in the day. Supply chain came maybe 5 years after I graduated as a term. I encompassed everything inside of that. Okay. I did go to Ohio State and get my MBA a few years after that in operations logistics. I don't know, yay or boo? I don't know. Some Michigan people are probably like boo. But, you know, that was an experience into itself. Again, it wasn't supply chain. It was starting to at that point. So I've worked for Honda of America in Marysville. That's a big, or at least when I was here, was a big recruiter. That was my first job out of Bowling Green. Was being hired as a buyer there. Do they still recruit here a lot? Do they?
Yes.
Yeah, they do. Okay. They were a big recruiter back in the day. When I was here, that was my first job. If you want to cut your teeth in a tough position, work for the automotive industry. They will get the money's worth out of you. Lots of hours, lots of weekends, but they paid overtime, which is strange. You're a professional, but for every hour, every minute you worked overtime, you got paid a bonus. So it was weird. You clocked in and out, even though you're a professional. But they wanted everyone equal because the line workers clocked in and out. They wanted all the office workers to clock in and out. And if you worked overtime, you got paid more. So that was great, but they definitely work you. You will learn more about processes and efficiency if you work for an automotive company. But you tend to burn out. 5 years of that, and I was burned out. That's one of the reasons I went and got my MBA. So, and I'll talk a little bit about that, about doing life changes and career changes in your career. Yeah, and I worked for Lucent Technologies. Doesn't exist anymore. Got bought out by Nokia. Right, it's Nokia now in Columbus, Ohio. And then I've been at Lexmark for 19 years. Let's see. So I've done all this stuff in supply chain. I've seen it all. You can do it all. All right. And we'll talk about how you change your position fairly frequently when you get in the real world, and how that's different. But all these items I've done, plus more. I didn't list everything I've done in supply chain because they're all related. Once you understand one of these aspects, right, you'll get sucked into some of these others as you go through your career if you stay in supply chain.
Mike, if you don't mind, if I can ask you one quick question. You work for 3 different companies. One, sort of Japanese type of companies. Is there any cultural differences among those 3?
Oh, massive. So Honda was all about being extremely structured, right, and knowing, and doing a lot of hard work, right. They almost never hired people except when they need to, so you're working very hard. But they knew what they were doing. It was extremely structured. This company, Lucent, this was at the time of the dot-com bubble, okay, when cell phones were just taking off, right? And so it had, I think, quadrupled in size in 3 years. So it was complete chaos. No one knew what they were doing. There were no processes. Everyone was fighting. It was territory battles between departments. It wasn't a great time. But I learned a lot just about human nature being in there. And Lexmark is also a U.S. company, but it was a breakaway company. This used to be IBM typewriter division, and they broke away to make printers and became their own company. So they were almost like a startup. So I guess I've seen kind of all those aspects, right? And then, of course, you get with the Honda, you get the Japanese influence as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. That's true.
So as well, and we'll talk about this too when we talk about globalism, but I've managed teams remotely, not in place, but I got to visit there often in China, Philippines, Mexico, and India. So All right, what do we got here? Oh yeah, and so I've actually switched, so the last 5-8 years I've been in IT, not supply chain. We'll talk about that too. So, I'm gonna cover these topics, all right, some tips and tricks over the years I've learned, that hopefully you guys take some of this with you, okay? Because I think you'll learn, talking to someone that's been in your seat, that's been through all this. And I'm like, I was gonna say this was gonna be a mid-career kind of thing, but the more I did the math, I'm like, oh, a late career, right? 28 years in, so I probably got another 10 to 12, maybe. So I'm guessing late career, just turned 50. So, so I'm getting towards the end of the tunnel, which has a light in it, which is the end, not the train coming the other way, hopefully. So we'll talk about all of these. So what you're gonna see here is I'm gonna put like, I originally prepared a presentation. My daughter saw this, like very detailed, like all these bullet points, everything. But I actually did away with that about midnight last night. And I'm gonna talk about the words of wisdom, and then I'll just speak to it, okay? Because I think you'll get a lot more out of it than me presenting a bunch of bullet points, okay? So, all right, career path. Let's talk about career path, because you're right at the beginning. So this is how I imagine my path, right? And my plan when I was, about to graduate or just after I graduate. It's gonna be path straight up the top. I'm gonna come in as an analyst, and I'm gonna make assistant manager, then assistant director, and director, and vice president, president, CEO. I'm shooting straight to the top. I'm gonna do it all inside purchasing, because I like purchasing, right? But that's not the reality at all, and nor do you want to do that. You do not want to do that. And we'll talk about why. Here's reality. It's a switchback, right? You're going to be going, and you should be going into lots of different positions, different locations, different companies, taking breaks from your career, doing career changes, okay? And it makes you a stronger employee and a better person. Because you stay in a narrow alley, what you'll do is you'll Peter principle out somewhere down here. You know what the Peter principle is? Have you ever talked about Peter principle? It means you advance to the highest level of your incompetence. So you will only go as high as you can in that one position and no further, is what it means. And you see it a lot of times when you'll get to these companies, people who have been in a position 20 years, 15 years, they're good enough to do their job, but not good enough to go any further, all right? Because they may have been trying to do this, but really, you gotta be looking for the opportunities to right and left and not just upwards, okay? So, yeah, so it's gonna make you a more well-rounded and happier person, okay, if you take the switchback. Okay, so like I said, success is rarely a straight line. Understand your career goals. So you're gonna see that there's two, no matter supply chain, accounting, finance, marketing, advertising, sales, however you wanna go, really there's two ways, general ways. You can go down the professional path or the management path. Both are very valid. The professional path is where you're gonna be what we call a SME, or SME, or subject matter expert. Okay, so you're gonna get very credited in that. You're gonna become the person to go to. You're going to, stay. You're not gonna go into people management, but you're going to stay in that area. But that doesn't mean like you're standing still, right? You got to keep your skills fresh. You got to keep yourself marketable. You got to see what's externally happening to make sure your skills are marketable to outside companies. So the problem you get a lot of times if you stay in a kind of a professional is that you don't do that. You get really good at your job at company X and the systems in company X, but they're not very marketable going elsewhere. So you can do things like certifications, right? So you got APICS, ISM, right? I did all that early in my career. Conferences, right? You can mentor with other professionals. You got to keep your skills fresh and relevant, okay? If you do the professional path. And then you have the managerial path of, hey, I'm going to people manage, okay? And you can bounce between these two, right? And not just one time, you can go multiple times, okay? Because again, it's not a straight line. I've seen people that did the professional path, right, which is good, and they said, I'm going to be a manager, and they went to management and hated it. They, for whatever reason, maybe personality, maybe for other reasons, they couldn't, handle people well in conflict and motivation, and vision, and goal setting. And so they went back to professional, and that's okay, that's great. You need both in an organization. You can't have all the type A's trying to be in the org, climbing to the top, or you fall apart. You can't have just professionals in there, or you're not gonna have the leadership and vision. So it's a mix. So think about that. And you don't, one of those things, and this is in your career, you don't have to decide right away, okay? Which path you go, but once you do, you want to do a plan for it, okay?
So something related to that, you hire a lot of people throughout your career, and also still many people working for you.
Yeah.
Then if you're looking for a specific personal attribute or skill set, what kind of skill set that you usually value?
That's a good questions, but we didn't. Let me pause that. What skill sets are we looking for employees? Because that's gonna come in about 3 slides. And it's almost like I fed you that question, so that's perfect. Because it's gonna come after this, and it's very relevant, what we're looking for. Okay, so the first thing, we're gonna talk about globalism, then we'll get a little bit more about career path. So, it's the ultimate challenge and opportunity. Okay, and what I mean by that, let's go into here. All right, so when I graduated, the only people we were competing against is like some of the local universities. So we're competing against like Miami of Ohio, maybe Ohio University was another supply chain school. And so when these companies came, and this is funny, this was like pretty much pre-internet, right? The only way you really got hired is the companies came to your campus and interviewed you, right? Because literally, if you want to get an application back then, you'd have to call, then you'd have to mail you the paper application, fill it out, send it back. So everything was very, very regional. The world was very small. Okay, so that was good and bad. It was good in the sense that your level of competition was just a few hundred people, right? Literally every year. But the opportunity was smaller too, because you're limited almost to the companies just coming on campus, right? So obviously the world's completely changed. It's nothing like that right now, right? So let me put some perspective on that, like how much has changed. And because I've been in these countries and managed people in these countries, I can talk about a little bit. So United States now, right, we got there's a number of graduates each year. So about 2.8 million graduates in the United States from almost 4,000 some institutions, all right? So now that sphere has grown, right? Because they're not just competing against some regional universities, you're competing against Arizona State is a big supply chain. Michigan State, all those around the country. So now that pool has gone 10x because of the way that everyone can apply for positions regardless of what school you're at. If you look internationally, this is what's changed the most, right? Is now you're competing against a pool of people around the world, not just regional, not just United States. Let's just take 2 countries for example, but this applies to Western Europe, almost any other country, right? So if you look at India, they had 6.9 million graduates 2 years ago, or I think, 3 years ago now. All right, out of almost 50,000 institutions. And because of globalism, we're also competing for the same job pool as those folks, right? I mean, the population of Ohio is like 10 million or 11 million, so put some perspective how many are out there, right? And if you go to China, right, it's even more, 8.2 million. They have a lot fewer institutions, so I guess their universities must be massive, right? So that's kind of like to scare you, but like that's why I'm saying it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. The opportunity is that now you get to fill job roles around the world, right? And I've been able to do that too. It's no longer just these companies around Ohio or just in the Midwest. You can go and manage, and why I've never directly gone in China and India and managed, I've remotely managed them, that's the opportunity, right? You can now, especially if you're mobile or flexible, you can go anywhere, any country, or even work remotely for another country. So your competition's increased, but so is the opportunity, almost at the same magnitude. And I like it this way better. There's far more out there now. Okay? Any questions or thoughts on that? That's scary. Okay.
Yeah, of course, you
It's-
need to
There's a lot of
work,
opportunity out there.
yeah, if you need to work globally, and sometimes you have to communicate with, foreign people, we usually make a presumption that they will speak English, because English is almost like a universal language. But, almost like every summer I went to China, usually guest to speak or teach there. And then I was really surprised by their lack of English skills and, some basic English, which I thought that they would understand, they don't. So, that also means that, am I forced to learn foreign language? So foreign language skill is important? Or?
Not as much as it used to be. That's interesting, like back when I graduated, it was important to learn foreign language, but English has become so ubiquitous in that time, right? It's kind of a loss for the world, but a gain for Americans, so I guess British too. So I did a study abroad when I was here. I went to France for a semester, and back then, going to France, like very few people knew English, so you had to pick up French. I had to learn it. Lived with a host family. I didn't know any French went in, but after living there for a couple months, I could speak it. You go to Europe now, and virtually anyone will know some English. It's very generational. The young people, virtually across most of the developing world, is learning English in schools, unlike it was when I was growing up. So, with that being said, you should always know a few phrases, a few words, how to read wherever you're going. That goes a long way to being culturally sensitive and to work with people. Okay, just don't assume. Learn how to say hello and how are you and so forth, and just a few phrases go a tremendous amount. So, get a little off topic there, but take those opportunities too. Did anyone do a study abroad here? No? I guess now they don't do the France one anymore. They do Strasbourg as the study abroad opportunity here at Hungary. So if you ever, there's other opportunities. You can actually do it. If you ever go to graduate school, you can still do study abroad. And so when I was at Ohio State, I did study abroad in South Africa for a semester. Even though I was like 30 or 32 at that time, I still did study abroad, which was wild. So there's still opportunities to do that even in a postgraduate type of study. Okay, so let me talk about this and I'm gonna get to your question, okay? So here's another way the world's changed. Low skill and repetitive work will be automated or offshore. That has massively changed. So again, when I graduated, you could get hired by Honda or one of these others, come in as a planner or buyer, and you were just a spreadsheet jockey, right? We had like 100 people in a room working on purchase orders, cranking them out, right? Because we were using mainframes and terminals back then, or even hand spreadsheets, right? So you needed like lots of bodies. And the skill level wasn't that high. You didn't have to necessarily have a degree to do that, okay? But with software applications, automation, communication, right, it's gone. It's largely gone. And I've been part of that, okay? I've actually taken departments that I worked for and we've offshored them, okay? Because we can hire people in India and Philippines and China for about 10 times less than the United States. And they're S-skilled, okay? At least for these type of skills, okay? Most places now, almost every company, large company, has what's called a global service center. You know this concept, global service center? Basically, we start a subsidiary. We have one in Cebu, Philippines, and one in India, where we put our accounting and our buyers and so forth there. A lot of times, Americans are managing them remotely or dotted line to them, but a lot of those jobs that were here are now over there, okay? Again, this is scary, right? But it's an opportunity because if you do have the right talent and high skill level, it's an opportunity for you to take advantage of. So let me get back to your question, okay? Here's what we look for, problem solving, okay? Problem solving is a skill. That is what universities in the United States are the best at in the world, is cranking out graduates who know how to solve problems. The way we teach, we don't give you the answers, and it's just not rote, right? It is a problem that you need to solve, right? And here's every problem that ever existed in the world, right? You have limited information and limited time to solve it, right? You don't have perfect information in infinite amount of time, right? Anyone can solve that problem, right? So you have to make the best decision with limited information. So that is what we're looking for. And that's what graduates of universities in the United States generally offer that most other countries don't, right? So that, hone on that skill set. So when you get frustrated, when you get projects from Dr. Min or the other professors, and it's very frustrating, you know, and it's hard, that is what is the value you guys are bringing out to the outside of the world, okay? Any questions about that? So we challenge them on problems. What have you done in your career? Tell me about the problems you've encountered and how you solve them, is the questions we tend to ask now, not necessarily a list of your responsibilities. That you were a buyer for $1 million of airbags at Honda. Okay, tell you much. Tell me about a problem you solved. Oh, the airbags, you know, blew up at the factory. We had to, you know, send planes and bring them to the production line within a week. That's a real problem I had to solve. I used to buy airbags for Honda, so you know, doing that type of problem solving is going to get you, you know, far and good. Okay, so that's the good news. We want to scare you, but I want to give you the good news too. Okay, so we'll move on to some more tactical things as you get into any job, especially as you get into your very first job. And that is, own your position, make it your own. What I mean by that, you're gonna come in, we're gonna have a job description, right? Or even someone training you. This is what you do, right? But what you're interested in and what you like to do doesn't always union join exactly with what that job description is. So take what you enjoy and make it part of it. So for example, I liked, early in my career, I was a buyer for Honda again. We were working in offices day in and day out. I like to travel, I like to see suppliers, right? So, you know, what I did is part of my performance, they said, well, Mike, you have to come up with your, you know, performance criteria for you to achieve. I said, well, I want to achieve to visit at least 3 suppliers, right? So I made something that I enjoy as part of my, you know, performance path, okay? Another time, you make it your own. Like, I really liked working with expediters at Honda. What I mean is, we have emergencies all the time. We have parts that wouldn't arrive on time, we'd have snowstorms, we have to fly them across the country. And there are these companies that can take, that can fly to any 2 parts in the United States, and within a few hours you can call them, all right? They have these DC-3s, these planes built in the 40s and 50s, or Learjets, or other aircraft. They're very specialized, right? You can call them, they will get you to any 2 points in the country. And so we used to hire them to get from, let's say, Red Oak, Iowa to Marysville, Ohio, to get some critical components. It's about $80,000, by the way, $50,000 to $80,000 to just do one plane. But I really enjoyed it because I used to go to the airports, meet them at the airport, meet these crazy pilots who were on call and were really crazy. Everyone else in my department hated that. So I said, I'm going to make this part of my job. I'm going to become the liaison to all the expeditors out there. So I became the point of contact to all the expeditors and relationships with them. Got to meet with the pilots and everything, got to meet the airplanes out on the airport, got to drive our cars onto the runway so we can unload the parts into the cars and bring them to the factory floor. No one else enjoyed it, I enjoyed it because it got me out of the office. I got to meet interesting people. So that's just one example. So find something that you like and enjoy and make that part of whatever job role you have, okay? Another thing too is you're gonna have structured and unstructured jobs to come into. Sometimes you come in a job and they will have detailed out exactly what you're supposed to do, right? And other times they're gonna come in and it's just gonna be like, well, you're a buyer and you're supposed to buy parts. Like it's very vague, right? And this is how you still make it your own, right? You need to look and make that job. So sometimes you will come into these vague job descriptions and you want to make that position, make it what you want. So for example, there was a rotation I did when I was at Lexmark that it was a very vague job description. And I was in this managerial rotation, so the guy ahead of me took this position. He said, there's almost nothing here. Like, I'm bored every day. I don't know what to do. I don't like it. And so for 6 months, he did almost nothing. He got bad reviews because of it, right? Well, I came in the same rotation, and I said, well, I went around. I said, what problems are you guys having in this area, right? What can I do to solve these? You know, go out there, and I made a whole new job and job description out of that same role that this other guy had 6 months before. Okay, so make it your own. Oops. I spoke so long on that slide, it was actually. So I need to move. All right, so you've heard this phrase: build a better mousetrap, and the world will be a path to your door. Wrong. It's not true. Here's what I mean by that. Is I've seen, and I still see people who, they're very good workers. They will crank out the work. They're excellent at what they do. No one knows it. Okay? No one knows it. People just assume that's how the world is. And I remember I did a job where I was working every weekend for 6 months. And I thought, well, I'll be recognized by the management because I'm cranking out output, I'm doing it right, and so forth. When I finally met, with my manager performance review, he had no idea. He just assumed that was the level one. I said, I've been working every Sunday for 6 months. He didn't notice, right? So you will not get very far if you can't advocate for yourself. Advocate, all right? Let people know what you're doing, the good work. Doesn't mean to be a braggart, right? Or every time you see your manager, hey, did you know I did this? No, it's making sure that, management and people around you are aware of what you're achieving, okay? And not being shy about that, okay? And then push for what you want. Is that a promotion? Is it a raise? Is it a different position? Is it to travel more? Ask for what you want. As a manager, I've been a manager for many years now, can't mind read. People will build up inside and doesn't the manager know I want a raise? I'm working so hard, doesn't it? No, we don't. But if I have two equal performers, and one asks for the raise and the other doesn't, I'm giving the raise to the person who asked because it's important enough for them to actually push for it and advocate. I respect people that push me and advocate. Advocate for yourself. Okay? Again, it doesn't mean rude, you do it in a professional manner. But I do that even to this day, where I'm like, I want a new position, I want this, right? And I make it clear. So managers don't mind. So, okay? Any questions on that?
If you usually work as a group, then everyone who made a contribution need to get some kind of credit. How do you share credit?
Be careful about that too. Don't take credit for what others people work. Make sure that that you talk about how it was a collaborative effort and that you were part of it and so forth. I've had people take credit for my work before. I found out later that a manager that I had, that I did all this work for, that he took credit for. So, and it's going to come back to bite you if you go about that way. So you do, and we'll talk about this about matrix organizations and credits and so forth. But make sure we give credit where it's due, right? It's not always I was part of the team and we did this is perfectly acceptable. But as well, talk about yourself. So.
Yeah, in my case, someone who took the credit for the job that I have done happens to be university president.
Oh, you're
I
tenured
brought
now,
like
right?
millions of dollars to the university. But, the local news media talk about how he actually put so much money that I'm the one who actually.
You did it? Yeah. That will happen too. That'll happen too. And some of it's unavoidable, but some of it because if you broadly communicate it, people understand. Well, he said that really well. This individual who got that benefit, right? Because if it's someone that far above you, it's difficult to necessarily override or confront them. But again, you don't keep it secret. Your achievements. All right. I'm gonna almost say, like, if you walk away and don't remember any of this, right? Remember this. Ask for forgiveness, not permission. And what I mean by this is being bold in your career. Early in my career, I would come up with these ideas of how to do something better or differently. And I would ask my manager, what do you think about this proposal? What do you think about this new contract language? What do you think about this? Should I do it? Should I not? You know, and half time to say yes or half time to say no. You know what? What I've learned in life, and this applies outside of it too, is ask for forgiveness, not permission. You gotta do that. Doesn't mean you don't tell them necessarily, like, hey, I've come up with this new process and I've been implementing it, okay? Let me know if you have concerns or if you have questions about it, right? You will get much further. And believe me, 9 times out of 10, your management will either support you or acknowledge it, okay? Now, occasionally, you will get your hand slapped because you overstepped the boundary that should have been their call, right? That's okay. That's okay. That will happen. But those 9 other times will actually advance you, okay? Be bold in your career. Take actions, right? Still inform, but just it's the context of how you're doing it. Should I do this? Or, hey, I am doing this, all right? Let me know if you have concerns. Okay. All right. Okay, matrix collaborations is kind of coming here. This is the other thing that's changed a lot. Again, back in the day, you know, we just worked within our own departments. You know, just planners work together. And if it was anyone outside, we had a liaison to a different department. Organizations are so thin and efficient now. There's so many fewer people doing the same functions because we're all doing a lot more work per person than it was in the past, that really organizations work in a matrix manner. What I mean is that you're gonna have relationships and you're gonna be collaboratively doing teamwork across multiple departments, right? So I'm always working with accounting, right, and finance, and purchasing, supply chain, IT to get something done. I need their support to get this project done. And so building those relationships and knowing how to work with them and knowing how to network is very critical, as a critical skill. So I know, like, group projects, man, right? Group projects, it's one of the hardest things you do in school, right? So that skill set will take you pretty far. Learning how to work with other people, how to motivate other people to do what needs to be done, do conflict resolution as well, trying to get stuff done. Those will go a long way, especially in this world. Especially when you're working with people not in your department but other areas who have a completely different mindset, whose acronyms don't even make sense to you. Okay? Questions?
Yeah, like culturally, you know, company like Samsung and Hyundai, and they have a matrix organization setting. So, you know, I interact with some of their managers, look at their business card. No one has a business card saying that I'm the production manager or, you know, purchasing manager. It's simply saying the team leader.
Yep.
But I think culturally, and I don't know how that's going to fit into some companies in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, people still put a lot of weight on titles, but titles are less important than they used to be. It's it's your reputation and what you're making of yourself. And so I struggle even when I do business cards, which I hardly do anymore. Nowadays we just do QR code stuff. But what do I put down for that? Like, technically my title is information manager, IT manager. But that says way too little and not and too much at the same time. Because I'm constantly working with the business to resolve software issues. And so I'm neck deep in the business and their processes. So that's not strictly IT, right? So, yes. Okay. And because I'm in IT, I have to be extremely matrix. Okay. Work yourself out of a job. This sounds funny. Work yourself out of a job. Can anyone guess what this might be? Okay. This took me a while to learn this, but it's one of the most valuable things you'll come to understand. What I mean by this is that when you come into your job, you're always going to work to make it more efficient, right, and better, and simplify to the point where your 8-hour days should be a 2-hour day. Okay? Haven't encountered a job yet that I couldn't, in 2 or so years, crush that down. Because a lot of times you're gonna come into a job and the person who was doing it before wasn't very efficient. There's something called institutional momentum, which I should have a slide on that, where things are done because that's the way they've always been done. You ask them, why do you have this report that's being done, right? Why are you guys executing this way? Well, it's always been done that way. And no one understands what the original reason was. So let me give you a real life example. So I came into a position where I had to create like 10 reports every week, okay? And I crank them out, and it's one of those jobs I was working weekends on, cranking them out, sending them out to large groups of people. Back then, reporting was much more difficult, it was very more manual to do. And I said, some of that I was able to automate, write scripts, write macros and scripts and make it much more efficient. Others, I was like, I'm never hearing a word back from these people. Like, why am I still doing this? So what I did is I stopped sending all the reports. This was my core job description in this role. I stopped sending it. I said, if it's important, you know, they're gonna write me back, they're gonna call me. It was interesting. Out of the 10 reports, only 3 people contacted me back on 3 different reports. Right? So, hey, Mike, where's the report? Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. And I restarted those 3 reports. Those other 7, I stopped, I never restarted. I never heard a complaint. So they were put in place at some time. There was some emergency, contingency, some piece of information that was needed for some crisis 10 years ago. We need to know the inventory levels at this warehouse at all times. We need to have a report done weekly, and that was done. But then the need went away, or those people rotated out and didn't care anymore. So think about that too. Do you still need to do it? And I wish I'd put a slide on this. You want to kill institutional momentum, right? Because human nature is to keep doing things over and over again because I know it. It may not be the best way to do it, but I know it. Okay? So what I mean, so it's work yourself out of the job. So if you're talking about being a professional versus manager, so I'm talking about being professional, those are the things. Automate, simplify, don't do that work, right? And reduce that workload. And then the things that you pick up are things that are more interesting. Like I said before, own your own position. What is interesting to you? What problems are solvable to you that you can go out and attack with that new free time? Or, hey, I'm gonna look for the next position as well. Because what's gonna happen after 2 or 4 years, you're just gonna get mentally bored. You should get mentally bored with any position. Because you've done it so many times, right? You made it super efficient, you understand nuts to bolts how it's done. You wanna go ahead and look for the next opportunity. So you're working yourself out of the job, right? If you're a manager, and I've taken this technique like 4 times now to work myself out of a job. I'll come into organization, managing people, and initially, a lot of times the manager work is extremely high. What I do is I do what's called the team leader concept. I find 1 or 2 people in the team who are looking to advance, right? But they're not ready for management, but they want to grow their career. I name them, team leads. And I start giving them my managerial duties, running my staff meetings, making decisions, and so forth. And over time, right, my workload decreases. They get this type of workload, so they're gaining experience in leadership, right? And then when it comes time for me to move on, it's an easy transition. They know, 3/4 of my job at that point. And so I'm almost at that point in my current job where I've got 2 team leaders who are extremely competent, who are doing most of the work I did when I first came in. So they'll, but of course then, here's another thing, I don't think I put a slide on it either, was that, maybe I did later, was you'll give work to the busiest person in your department. In other words, it's a weird thing. You will generally find that you will give most work to the busiest person. And what I mean is because generally the busiest person is the most competent person, and so you tend to give more workload on that. So you got to be careful about that too. Is that if you're competent and good, you'll get piled on. So you got to be careful of that and know when to say no. Right? It's okay to say no. I'm speaking too long and just crushing these slides. Okay. Let me see. your manager. So it seems strange. Manager manages you, right? You need to manage your manager. Set expectations with them. Set your performance goals that are in line with what you enjoy and where you want to go, right? Let them know, I've already talked about this, of what you want to do. Don't be shy about what your next step is, okay? So literally, you will manage your manager, right? Oh, and here's a big thing too. So never surprise your manager with bad news. Never, especially in a presentation, right? So we all have bad news. Things happen where, you know, you've missed a delivery, or delivery was missed, finances was missed, so forth. There's bad news coming. Don't ever let your manager be first exposed to that in a presentation with other people. Ever. You gotta give heads up. You make, you know, a phone call or an IM. Hey, just let you know in this presentation, there's this coming down. You need to know. And that way they can mentally prepare. They can make some phone calls and distribute their information, and so that they're not surprised. Managers get very upset when they get surprised with bad news. So always give your managers a heads up. Another thing too, we all make mistakes. I've made tons of mistakes in my career and decisions and so forth. Admit your mistakes, okay? But there's one way to admit it, right? And just apologize. Not quite the right way to do it. You admit it and you come up with a solution. Okay, I made a mistake. I ordered the wrong parts for the factory this month. It was my fault. Here's how I fixed it, and how I'm going to fix it. Right? You'll be seen as a leader, right? And I talked about problem solving. That's a problem solver right there. It's just like, well, I made a mistake. Oops, what can we do now? It's more like, I got a plan. I worked with these people. This is how we're going to recover. Okay. All right, so let's talk about ethics. So this is a quote from a movie a while ago. Honor's a gift that only you can give yourself. What I mean by this is that you're going to be tempted or tested one time or multiple times in your career on ethics to do something unethical. Okay, I'll give an example of my career where actually I was an intern here at Bowling Green, working for a utility company, and I was an intern in the purchasing department, and the buyer came to me and said, hey, we got to, you know, for my bonus, I need to accumulate all the cost savings I did for the year. Okay, great. All right, might go in there and, you know, add them all up. He goes, but I just want you to add up those parts where the price decreased. Ignore the parts where the price increased. And I said, I refused. He was a senior buyer, and I'm like, I can't do that. You can't just take the negative ledger and not the positive ledger, right? And it would show a dishonest picture of it. So I actually refused, and he respected that. And ultimately, I went back and gave the true number, right? It was unethical to do something like that, okay? So you have to understand when to say no, when it's unethical. And sometimes it's clear, like that was absolutely unclear. Other times, it's not going to be clear. So when it is not clear, right, and get it in writing. So what I mean is, if someone's asking you to do something and it might be shady, but you're not even sure, but they're ordering you to do it, like manager or director or someone to do it, say, and a lot of times they're going to verbally tell you this, like, Mike, I need you to do this. I remember in my career, one time we had a program for workers to go get their master's degree, and the company would pay for it. Okay, it's great, right? You just have to go to this site, internal sites, and apply. Right? There was a woman that worked for me who wanted to do this. This is great. Okay, so I contacted HR and was like, exactly how do we do this? She said, oh well, hold on. She said, don't have her apply. She said, you need to get verbal permission from the entire leadership chain before she applies. I'm like, that's weird. I don't need verbal. I mean, once she's applied, if she doesn't qualify, just deny it. Well, it turned out, she was a woman in her 40s. They were aiming this towards recent college graduates. They didn't want to invest in older employees, even ones that have been loyal for 20 years. And so, if they had people apply, like let's say they had 20 people apply, and half of them were, let's say, in the 40s and half of them in the 20s. Everyone in the 20s got accepted and everyone else got denied. That's a clear case documented of ageism, right? Of discrimination. But if you have to get verbal approval first and it never gets applied, people never apply in the first place, there's no paper trail. So in this case, I was like, I figured this out. I said, this isn't right. I told the HR person, I said, I'm not comfortable with that. I said, go ahead and put that in writing. Write back to me, what you said here, that I have to get verbal permission, right, before she can apply, right? And she wouldn't do that. So I even okay, here's another way you can do it. You can write the email yourself. It says, hey, per our conversation, dated blah, blah, blah. I just want to confirm that the process is supposed to get verbal confirmation. Can you reply back to this email that this is what I'm supposed to do? She never replied because she knew they created a paper trail, right? That would come back. So in the end, I was able to get that employee to actually apply, for that master's degree, the right way. Okay, and I wasn't sure at first if this was up or not, but get it in writing. People will not, if they're asking you to do something fishy, they will never put it in writing. So it's your, what we call, get out of free jail card. Look, I was instructed to do X, Y, and Z, because if you're verbally told something to do and it turns out to be unethical, you'll be thrown under the bus. I never told you to do it like that. Or we talked, but my memory of that conversation is this: you took it way too far, and there's no record. Okay. So when you're uncomfortable, get in writing. It's not everything. This is a very small part of when you run into these situations. But when you feel that gut feeling that's weird, have them write it to you. Okay. Any questions on that? Ever encountered that? No? Don't want to comment? Okay. Yeah, so in that same vein, trust takes years to form, and organizations run on trust. If you look at any org chart, any org chart or any organizational pattern or anything, but companies run on trust, right? It's who you trust, and do they trust you and do you trust them, all right? Trust takes years to build up and seconds to lose. So that's why I say when you start doing something unethical, it tends to snowball. So for example, if you change some numbers, to make, for example, I said cost savings, and you change some numbers and no one's gonna know. It's gonna make me look good, I'll get my bonus. Well, the problem is that the next quarter, you're gonna be expected to meet those same numbers or greater, right? And then the quarter after that, it's gotta be greater. And so the lie tends to build, right? And you can't, it's a trap, you won't get out of it. Right? A small lie that no one ever knows or will know about will turn into a monster that you can't back out of. Okay? So don't start at all. Right? Be true to yourself. Have honor. So I did talk about that already. All right, communication. So two-way monologue versus a dialogue. So what I mean, this is very important. Written versus verbal communication. Okay? Writing, like emails, IMs, texts, are great for instructing precise information, right? We need this done, here's all the background information, you do it this way. It's awesome for that, right? But what it's terrible about is emotional contact, okay? When disagreements start occurring, or emotion starts to rise, you need to pick up the phone and go in person with someone, okay? Because you can't get inflection and tone from emails or written communications. All right, I had, early in my career, there was me and this other buyer who got into an email, right? He sent me an email kind of accusing me of something that wasn't true, copied my manager on it. So I retaliated and sent back my version of events, copied his manager. Well, then he wrote back, basically doing ad hominem attacks back to me, copied my director, and then I did the same thing back to his, and we both of us look like idiots, right? And then when I've never met this person face to face, so my manager said, "We're putting you in the room," and we met, and we got along great. It was a complete misunderstanding. He was actually a cool guy, a great guy, right? It was the tone and inflection of the emails, a lot of times you'll assume which case, right? That they mean this, maybe they mean that. So my advice to you is when you start getting these emails or texts and emotion starts getting into it, misunderstandings getting into it, stop what they're written. Pick up the phone or meet them in person. And I'm telling you, 95% of the time you will resolve that conflict that way. It will escalate written, okay? So it's being a human being, okay? So understand the difference between those two. All right, work-life balance. So understand your stage of life. Really understand the trade-off between time and money, okay? So early in your career, you tend to have more time and less money. And as you get in your career, you tend to have more money and less time. There is a trade-off between the two. So what I mean by that, going back to career goals, if you're young and flexible and don't have many dependencies, like, you don't have a spouse or children yet, that's the time to crush your career. Go in there and crush it out. And do those overtimes and travel overseas and work overseas and get a good, strong start to your career. So that when there's time where you have dependencies, whether you're getting married, having kids, looking after your parents, you have that, you're in a position in your career that you have that flexibility. So I'm in a part of my career, in my job, I have almost ultimate flexibility. I'm making my own hours, even though I'm married, right? It was very important to me that to have that flexibility because my kids were getting older, and so I was able to, be a coach on my daughter and son's teams for sports, and be a Boy Scout leader, and go mountain biking, and spend a lot of time with my children, being very involved with my children, because that was important to me. But it was the blood, sweat, and tears in my first 15 years that allowed me to build up the career to the point where I could have the flexibility. And I know when, my daughter, she's about 1 year away from, graduating high school, and she'll go away. My son's not that far behind. I know I'm going to focus back on my career again because I'll probably have so much free time to do with myself, right? I can, I'm kind of getting the itch of traveling again and being more aggressive with my career. Again, that straight path, if I was going to the top, well, that has sacrifice. If I did that, it would have sacrifices to my family. I remember there was a guy I worked with who did that. He was young. He was probably like 25, 28, newly married, had twin sons, but he was super motivated to advance up the mountain. So he was like my age, but he was like already like a director. But he spent every night off till like 8 or 9 p.m. He had like 2 one-year-old sons at home, right? And got a divorce, right? His life kind of fell apart, right? The whole side. He sacrificed money when he needed time at that point, right? So understand the trade-off, and it'll switch during your life. There will be times you want to crush your career, and other times you're going to focus on others or personal things, and it goes back and forth. There's times where you will get burnt out. So let's talk about like career changes. So like I said, I worked for Honda, right? 5 years, got burnt out, worked weekends, worked overtimes. And it was funny, like how that changed occurred. I was at a bookstore and came across a Lonely Planet guide on New Zealand. Like, this is cool. Went through it, bought it, took it home. So I want to go to New Zealand. And so I was like, I need to, and I was by then like, it was like 28 or so. And I'd been just working. And I was like, I'm missing life, right? So I said, I quit a very good job. I had the vice president and the director come to me, Mike, why are you leaving? You're leaving to go to a country and backpack? I said, I have to. Like, if you give me a leave, of absence, that'd be great, but I'm going regardless. And ultimately, I just quit and went to New Zealand for a while, okay? And I came back, but I had a plan. I said, well, if I lose my job and they'll give me a leave of absence, right, I'll go get my master's degree, get my MBA. So just before I left, I applied at Ohio State. And so as soon as I got back from New Zealand, I started my master's at Ohio State. So you can work in personal goals like that, and life changes, into a larger career path as well. Okay? We're almost done. Yeah, so I talk about this sometimes, I'm not spending much time, but if you're going to go into management, you have to be a soldier before you can be a general. So you have to learn how to follow before you can lead. Again, I've seen people who've gotten into management too early. There was someone that I worked for, a director, she was like 28, and to be a director 28 is extremely young. She advanced super quickly, but because she advanced too quickly, she didn't have the skill set, the people skills, the broader knowledge, that switchback of experiencing lots of different positions on the way up, where she struggled in that role, and ultimately, they downgraded her to some other position because she couldn't handle it. Right, so you got to learn how to follow before you lead. You have to have competency first before you can get into management. Okay, and it's gonna be some of that switchback before you get up there. I was very impatient too in game management. Took a while to break in, but I'm glad I took that path because it made me a stronger manager. Just a couple more here. So pass that. Yep. All right. Oh, advancing. Very tough. Yeah, so here's an advice as a manager, you're only strong as your team. What I mean by that is be careful of who you bring into your team. You want to build them up, right? And you're only as good as they are. So you want to be supportive of them, challenge them, right? And if it's not working out, sometimes you have to make hard decisions of letting people go, right? But you need to have the competent people. And the way you do that is empower your people. Number one rule as the manager, push as much decision making down as far as possible, right? You'll come in a lot of times as a manager and you're like, why am I doing these spreadsheets? Why am I doing this tactical work? The workers should be doing it. And so you need to push all that down, but push the decision making down to them. And so what I mean is, in the past where the manager just would make that call, you do this, you do that, we're gonna do that, you would ask, what do you think? What do you advise, right? Workers, tell me what your recommendations. And sometimes you go with the recommendations, sometimes you still have to make a decision otherwise. But it does two things. It empowers your employees so their life is a lot more enjoyable. When you have control as an analyst or professional to make decisions and your manager trusts those decisions, your enjoyment of your work life is far higher. And two, it takes the burden off you as a manager. If you micromanage as a manager, you burn out if you're making every last decision. You push those decisions down as far as you can. And I already talked about that, so and I think this is my last one. Yeah. So in management, a mistake I still see a lot of people like in management make is that, well, this is our role as this department. We do this X, Y, and Z. Right? It's a description of what you do, but it's not a vision. Have a vision of what your team is supposed to do. So let me give you an example. So a team I took over a few years ago, they were called the CAD/CAM application team. Like, it's so accurate, it's computer aided design, right? It's basically, they support applications that you can do drawings with, right? But it was just very focused. It was just these two applications and these team of people, they supported it, right? And I said, that's a very narrow vision. That's not a good vision. So I said, we're renaming. You guys are now the engineering application team. And now you're gonna support not just these CAD/CAM applications, but any applications that the engineers are doing that doesn't have IT support. Because engineers love going out there and buying these random applications for hundreds of thousands of dollars and no one knows how to support. I said, you will be that team of people that support it. And it's been great to be able to grow the team, right? Their responsibilities and scope has grown, but their enjoyment of their work has grown, and their job security has massively increased. Because if that application went away when they were just a CAD/CAM team, we would have just laid them off. But now they support 42 applications, right? And so their enjoyment of their job is better, their security is better. So that was having a vision. So let's take out a vision of where you want to go ultimately, not just a task list. Okay? All right, so that was a lot. I thought this would take 30 minutes. It looks like it was an hour and 17. So how about that for, overperforming? So any questions, thoughts?
Any questions?
Was this useful for you guys? Yeah? Okay. Hopefully. Hopefully I'll see you guys out there in the work world. And,
Yeah, we
couple
could
expert
have
interaction.
had more time to listen to your great piece of advice, but unfortunately.
We're past For the town of Kentucky.
Got limited time, but
Okay.
once again, I really appreciate your sharing and valuable experience with us and also practical insight with us. And that could be really valuable for, our students' future career. And so, as a small token of appreciation,
Oh, wow.
and I get some little mementos
Okay.
representing BGSU.
Okay, thank you, Dr.
Okay,
Young.
thank you so
Appreciate
much
it.
for your time.
Thank you.